Welcome to 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kerby. My guest today is Rob Palmer. Now, you may remember Rob Palmer. He's been here before when we did What's the Harm regarding psychics, but now you are here for a different reason, and we will talk about that briefly, but I do want to give you a brief intro. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Brian. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You are also known as the Well Known Skeptic. You are a former spacecraft designer, aerospace project engineer, programmer, and software engineer. You are a former believer in biorhythms, ancient aliens, ESP, all kinds of pseudoscientific nonsense, and you are now the eponymous author of the Skeptical Inquirer column, The Well Known Skeptic. In that column, you write book reviews, conduct interviews with skeptics and public figures, and investigate such topics as psychics and psychic fraud, and the purported sonic attacks on the U.S. diplomat embassy. Now, that's actually been back in the news again, so I'd like to, maybe we can talk about that at some point because that's back making its rounds again. But today you are here for quite a different reason. You're also a volunteer for Recovering from Religion. So that's what I want to talk about today. Recovering from Religion, what's that all about? What's the organization and what do you do?
Oh, it's a nonprofit, and it was created by psychologist Dr. Dalloway 12 years ago. With the goal of helping people who have been damaged by religion or are coming out of a religion, thinking that their former belief is not correct, and now they have psychological or actual real world turmoil because of it. So in a nutshell, our motto essentially is to provide hope, healing, and support for people struggling with issues of doubt or non-belief. So that's it in a nutshell. Basically, we meet people where they are. We don't try to deconvert people, but we try to help them in their struggles.
What do you do for the foundation?
Oh, it's a long list. I started out as the pandemic started, and I prematurely retired, so I had some extra time on my hands. And I had listened to a lot of atheist shows which promoted this organization, Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen. Jenna Belk is a great co-host who just promotes us all the time. Matt Dillahunty does. So, I would hear these people call into those shows and be referred to that organization. And I said, well, I have some extra time on my hands. Let me see what it takes to actually be on the other end when these people call. So I volunteered, and I was, the first thing I did was a helpline agent. So that's taking calls or taking text chats from our website to help people. And then I branched out and I do a whole bunch of other things we can talk about as this goes on, I guess. But the biggest part of it is definitely working the helpline.
Well, let's start there then. Talk to me about the helpline. As an adult, perhaps many people, I don't know, they grow up with religion in the household, they go to Sunday school, whatever it is, religion that they belong to. Then as they kind of grow through their 20s and 30s, it just kind of wanes and people naturally drop off. So what's with the helpline? Is that what you're talking about, that people call and they want to talk about that experience, or is this much more in depth than that?
So I guess the situation you described, I don't know if that's typical. I'm not sure we actually have data on what the typical path out of a religion is, but I have certainly gotten calls from people of all ages, 80-year-old people who've decided that they wasted their entire life, quote unquote, in a religion and that now they're sorry for that. All the way from the youngest caller I've ever taken was 15 years old. And she also said, I wasted my entire life in religion. It's hard to take that seriously for a 15-year-old, but it was her entire life up to that point. And we have people of all sorts of ages, and they come out for all sorts of reasons, and they have all sorts of different struggles. So people who call the helpline or chat in, could be anything from somebody just for the first time having watched an atheist versus a theist debate on YouTube, thinking, oh, this is going to strengthen my religion. And they come out in shock that the atheist won the debate clearly and they agree with everything they said. And the theist didn't know what they were talking about. And now they have this cognitive dissonance in their head because they're supposed to believe this other set of things, but what they just saw with their rational mind, was contrary to that. So that's one set of people who just realize something is wrong. There's other people who've been struggling for, could be weeks, months, years, starting to have doubts, maybe not being able to philosophically argue themselves totally into the fact that the doctrines they were taught were wrong. wanting to keep one foot into the religion, maybe because they miss the though they know because they've seen it to happen to other people. Other people get shunned when they come out publicly that they don't believe the religion anymore. You might be married to a spouse who, you're married in the faith, and that's going to screw up your marriage big time. You may have raised your kids religious, and now all of a sudden you're the parent and you're going to say, oh, I don't believe this anymore. So there's a whole set of issues people have. And that doesn't even count the actual, we'll say it's called religious trauma syndrome, RTS, where people really need psychological help because they've been damaged so much by our religion.
All right, that's great, actually, because now you've kind of compartmentalized it into two separate areas, which is what I wanted to get to. So there are people that just, it kind of wanes as they grow older, and then perhaps they see the debate and they realize, not only has it waned, I just don't believe this anymore. Even though it's waned, I still went to the High Holy Days or Easter Mass, and that was it. Now I really have reason to doubt. So there's that person many people may think of where it just wanes over their lifetime. But then there are the people that are actually traumatized and are actually in danger. So those are two separate areas, and you have to, as a helpline person, do you have to ascertain that very quickly, or is it obvious by the way they're talking to you?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a time limit to our conversations, so we let it flow naturally. We try to direct the conversation, make sure it's directed towards them. A lot of people will say, oh, tell me what you believe, talking to the agent, or, tell me your coming out story, and we're taught not to disclose that information in general, to keep the, discussion on track for the person who's calling in for their personal experience. And so you figure out what's going on. Occasionally we'll have, people in crisis, and we have to give them a suicide helpline or LGBTQ, helpline numbers for people who are in trauma because they've been, discounted in their family or religion because they're not straight. That's a whole nother category of people, by the way, fairly a large one, because most mainstream religions do not accept anyone who's not straight. And so, I would say the larger proportion of people coming out of a religion are because of that, right? If you're sitting in a pew and you're constantly being exposed to the message that you're broken and your inclinations are evil, that's a larger reason to get out of the religion than for the average person who may have some other issues, but not that one.
And when you talk about that's what you think is a large reason people may come out of religion, do you have any solid information on that, or is that just your personal experience through the helpline? Do you have statistics on, which religions call you the most and what's the reasoning?
Well, yeah, I don't have statistics on the LGBTQ thing, but just it's anecdotal. But a lot of our callers, much more than you would ever hear the percent in the general population. And another anecdotal evidence on that subject is if you look at the hosts of atheist shows or atheist YouTubers, large percent are not straight. They're gay, they're trans, they're non-binary. Much more than if you look any other subject on YouTube, it seems. And again, when they tell their stories, the reason is obvious. Not only did this make them not believe in the doctrine anymore, because if that part you're telling me about, being gay is evil and I'm going to hell, what else about the doctrine is wrong? And that just pushes people out further. And a lot of those people, reach out to us for help.
Now let's back up a little bit, because I want to talk about what you do when people call. So you spoke about this a little bit, but when people make the first call, it's a non-judgmental person that answers the phone for help, right? And you're not proselytizing atheism or sowing seeds of doubt, you're listening. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I said, I think we meet people where they are. So if it's somebody who is pretty still firmly in a religion and is having a problem with their particular congregation, we will even help them try to find a more appropriate church. We have a website which can, it's a poll, ask questions. What do you believe about subjects A, B, C, D, and E? Okay, you really are wrong to be a Catholic. You should be a Lutheran, that kind of a thing. But I do have to say, because the name of our organization, that's an extreme minority of callers. Mostly it's people who are having serious doubts about any religion, that a God exists, that sort of a thing, philosophical, or maybe they, they find out that there are contradictions in the doctrine in the Bible and that sort of thing.
And you're not sowing seeds of doubt, you're listening non-judgmentally, but do you give feedback so they can refine their thought process critically to figure out what they believe, or?
Right. So there is a technique that we're taught as agents, and it's called street epistemology. So this is sort of the maybe contrary to street preaching, which is a common thing that Christian ministers do. The epistemology part of that means it's the study of how people know what they know. Street just means you do it in public. So this is a technique to have non-confrontational discussions with people about a strongly held belief that hopefully avoids being confrontational. The technique was invented by Peter Boghossian, who wrote several books. One is called A Manual for Creating Atheists. There's another book, something like How to Have Difficult Conversations. And this technique can be used with any strongly held belief. You can talk about it with a flat earther or somebody believes in, per my previous appearance on your show, psychics. But it's commonly used for people with religious beliefs because it's most effective if someone really, really, really believes something and it means something in their lives. And of course, religion almost always, has that role. So we'll use that technique to make people question, perhaps for the first time, why they believe what they believe. As opposed to, no, you're wrong. The Bible doesn't say that, or here's the 2 chapters of the Bible which are contradictory. It's, well, why do you believe this statement is true? And then they'll say something. Okay, what's the evidence for that? Why do you believe that's true? And Anthony Magnabosco, who's a practitioner of this, and he's one of the people who've helped us in RFR, do this kind of thing. He's got a YouTube channel where there are probably hundreds, maybe more than that, videos of him doing the street epistemology technique. And it's quite amazing to watch it because he has short interviews, 5-10 minutes. At the beginning, he'll say, let's talk about something you're very confident in. Okay, pick something. Jesus is my savior. Okay, how confident are you that that statement is true? 100%. And then literally 10 minutes later, at the end of it, that he'll ask the question after all the questioning and answering it are over. Okay, how confident are you now? And they might have reduced that by 20 or 25%. I mean, that's astounding for a belief that you thought was 100% in your head, that a 10-minute conversation can do that. But I think it's illustrative of the fact that most people don't really ever question why they believe what they believe.
Through discussion, you're not giving reasons to doubt. People kind of figure that out for themselves through the conversation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and sometimes they ask questions. Quite a large number of calls are people with 1 foot out the door of a religion, 1.5 feet out the door. But there's something holding them back, and they want to ask us about it, because they can't ask anybody in the church or their other religious friends, because first off, most congregations don't want to hear that you're doubting anything. But they realize if they ask their minister this, even if they're okay with the question, they're just going to get a religious answer, and they're suspecting the religious answer isn't correct. So they want another source for an answer, and that's why they've called us. So a lot of times it's, I was about to leave, I'm pretty sure I'm an atheist, and then I had a sign, what I think is a sign from God. Could you explain how this isn't a sign from God? That kind of a thing. I just decided not to go back to church. I'm done with it. And then I go to get gas and I drive past my church's sign which says, come back to God. It's like, how could that not be a message to me? That happens. That kind of thing happens a lot.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that they're afraid to go to their church leader or their friends, because I also have heard that doubt is used to justify faith. I think even Mother Teresa famously wrote that she had doubts, and that it was written back to her that solidifies your faith. Having doubt is a good thing, and so that will solidify your faith eventually. I'm paraphrasing grossly here. It's been years since I read that, but asking questions, that's an interesting thing, because I find that surprising, I should say, that religious leaders aren't prepared to answer those questions. But I can see where you might be afraid to ask it.
Yeah, and especially if you've asked it, you've asked something even maybe not quite as controversial the first time and you got a really bad response, then you're not going to want to ask it again. That happens a lot. Yeah, the 15-year-old who called, she was going to a Christian fundamentalist school because that's where her parents sent her. Her parents are fundamentalists. All of her friends are in the school are fundamentalists. And she said, she started asking some questions of her friends, and they started like, Satan has you. I mean, something in that regard. So it's like, that just shuts you down. You're not going to be asking any more questions of them.
Well, that's a pretty good example of someone whose whole life would be turned upside down. If your entire social network is based around your faith. Everything from school, family, and friends. That's a life-changing event. So
Absolutely.
it's not like what I was saying where, you know, you go to church on Sunday and you go to Sunday school and then it's part of who you are, but it's not
Right.
who you are. So how many people come to you, it is who they are?
That's a very common thing. I don't know that I can give a percent on it, but I would say it's the majority. And interestingly, the majority, I think, of our agents here or on Helpline and elsewhere have come out of high control religions where it was their life. They were Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or some flavor of evangelical Christianity where it's your duty to convert other people. And yes, your life revolves around that. You know, you go on missionary trips and you know, bringing people to Jesus is your life, in fact. And that is the biggest problematic group when you're coming out of that, as opposed to somebody who just slowly drifts and they're not in a high control religion. You know, people throw the word cult around. Some people say any religion is a cult. There's no difference. But you know, being cultish is a scale. If you read the Wikipedia article on cult, probably if you printed it, would be like 10 closely, you know, one single space pages. It's a very tough subject to just crack in a sentence. Oh yeah, all religion's a cult. You know, I've seen descriptions where there's checklists of maybe 20 things, and the more things you can check off as questions that are answered yes by the particular religion, the more cultish it is. So, you know, does it control your sexuality? Does it control the clothing you wear, the food you eat, the friends? Are you supposed to shun people who don't, you know, believe what you believe? You know, each of those boxes you check makes it more cultish. Yeah, and we can all think of ones that are extremely cultish and ones that are less so. So, you know, the calls we get are definitely more from the people who've been in the religions which are more cultish, because it's probably just harder to just drift out of, as you use the expression.
And I want to talk right now again, reiterate that when people call, you're not proselytizing atheism or doubt. You're listening to them
Right.
to help them with their doubt. There's a big difference between those two things. Sounds like a lot of people that you're talking to, they also need help, like we just spoke, psychologically. Even maybe they will leave the church in their mind, but stay within the social network or something like that, just to live and exist. So this is a helpline. It's not a 1-800 turn into an atheist line.
Yeah, we definitely, that's one of the big rules. Do not deconvert people. If they're showing that they still believe and they want to believe, you know, we'll talk about other things with them, but that's not what we do. Yeah.
One thing I also want to say is we're talking about religion here, and you had mentioned that many people don't think through how they learn things. I also want to point out, you know, that's not true for a lot of things that we don't critically think about. It's just what we've always been taught. We're talking about religion here, and if you think through your mind about everything that you've been taught, there are several things that you probably can't justify without referring to.
Absolutely.
It's just what I know. And I'll link to an article, not an article, an interview I did with Massimo Pigliucci about this, what is knowledge and how do we know what's true. So if anybody, we're talking about religion today, but it's not limited to religion. Okay, so back to recovery from religion. We've talked about people struggling with the issues of doubt and non-belief, but you also get calls probably from people that may be in danger due to apostasy or their social network completely controls everything they do. Do you get those calls? I mean, you equipped for that, or do you try to refer them to a... Go ahead, please.
Yeah, we do refer them to other. In fact, so let's go back a little bit. If we have people who actually need psychological counseling, because we're not therapists on this line, we actually have a sister project, the Secular Therapy Project. So maybe we could talk about that later. But for people who are in crisis, yes, we have crisis helplines. We get calls occasionally from probably the most endangered people, which are Muslims who are still in the closet but don't believe anymore. And in fact, sometimes they're in a Sharia law country where, you know, in Egypt, you will get thrown into an insane asylum if you admit that you're an atheist. Other countries, maybe it's worse than that. You know, death penalty sort of thing. Or there'll be, you know, honor killing from your family. This, in fact, even happens in, you know, non-Sharia law countries. Yasmin Mohammed has talked to Recovering from Religion several times about her experience leaving Islam. and she's a Canadian Arab, and lived in Canada. But I just heard this yesterday in her talk. It's a common threat that it will bury you in the backyard to a woman who's leaving the religion or showing signs of not being faithful. It's freaking scary. But when we get calls from people like that, we'll refer them to other resources that can better directly help them dealing with ex-Muslim issues. It's a frightening scenario. I feel bad enough for Christians who are going to be shunned by their family, but when it comes to the point where like your life is literally in danger, it's frightening as hell.
And so you've alluded to the fact that this is actually an international organization, Recovery from Religion. So you get calls from all over the world. Do you have to refer them to someone that specializes in what they do? Are you equipped to take all calls?
No, we have. So from our website, there are 4 numbers on it from English-speaking countries: the U.S., Canada, Australia, the UK, and South Africa. So yeah, one of those. I think the Canada and the U.S. are the same number. So people from those countries can call directly on their own phones without charge. But there's also on our website, recoveringfromreligion.org, there is a bubble which lets you make a web call. So you can do that from anywhere in the world. And I haven't talked too much about it, but you can also chat in. If you're in a circumstance where you live with other people and you don't want to, be speaking in the house in a way that they'll know you're doubting, you can just text chat into us. And we have agents who take those kinds of contacts. So that works both ways, the calls and the chats.
And you preempted one of my questions, which was how do people, when they call, how do they know they're getting qualified help? And so you kind of talked about that, but can you go through that a little bit more so people can be assured?
Yeah, so we go through a training, to know what to do, what not to do, what to refer people to, which, by the way, one of the main points we do, besides just an ear to listen to people's problems and maybe point them in the right direction with their thought processes, if they have questions like that, is we have a team that puts together resources. And these are books, podcasts, YouTube videos, online articles that we point people to depending on what their particular circumstances are that they're calling in about. And those could be anything from being traumatized by the religion, trying to find community. But one of the main points is, and we do make this clear, if the conversation goes in a certain direction, is that we are not therapists, right? This is peer-to-peer support. And then we tell them about the Secular Therapy Project.
There's the volunteer helpline where you're trained, but then you are also trained to realize when you need to send someone off or not send them off, but refer them to professional help, perhaps psychology or some kind of therapy. Talk about that. So what do you do? So you get a call and you realize, I need to send this person along. This is not we're peer-to-peer.
Right. So we tell them you can call in or chat in as often as you want, but sometimes a one-on-one thing is not sufficient. Sometimes, they will need an actual trained therapist, especially if they're exhibiting signs of religious trauma. It's actually called RTS, religious trauma syndrome. So we will point them to the place on our website, which points directly to the Secular Therapy Project, which is an organization of therapists that have been vetted so that they are purely secular. They will not pull out a Bible or a Quran to try to solve someone's problems with them in their office, and that they only use scientifically verified methods of support. So they're not going to be pulling out, a pendulum or crystals either. And that's a set of therapists.
Man, you're hitting everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to offend everybody? Just get everything out there. We'll offend everybody all in one paragraph.
Sorry,
just
people.
Pull it all out.
Crystals don't work except in old-fashioned radios.
Okay, I apologize. Go on.
So yeah, it's hard because we take calls from people. Oh yeah, my therapist. I just I don't know what to do now. So like they've been going for a month or two. Takes a while of weekly meetings to describe your life's problems and whatever. And then it gets to the point where you're in for quite a bit of money, by the way, not only your emotional attachment to this person, but money. And then they'll say, okay, let's start working on your problem. Let's open the Bible to, Genesis and start reading. And if you're an atheist, that blows the whole relationship. So this is we get people who say that that's happened. And in fact, Dr. Del Rey, the psychologist who started Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project, started that second one because he heard these stories. And so now we have a resource we can send people to who, don't want religious counseling. So that's one thing is the Secular Therapy Project that we can send people to. The other thing is that we use the Meetup.com organization to run meetup groups. So we have 60 or so, I think it is, across the country and the world, most in the United States and Canada, but other places also, where we have trained agents like myself who run group therapy sessions on these subjects. And that's very helpful also if somebody can't get a counselor, because frankly, in this time of the pandemic, there are more people seeking counseling than ever before. And there's, the number of therapist hours have not increased. So it is just a thing. It's very hard to get a therapist these days for any subject, including from the Secular Therapy Project. They're so overworked. So a stopgap, at least, is to join one of these meetup groups, which is a support group where you can get input from other people who have similar issues, along with somebody trained to facilitate such a meeting.
And when people make these calls to you, it's completely anonymous?
Yeah, mostly that's up to them. It does surprise me every once in a while somebody will say, "Hey, I'm Bill Jones," and okay, I didn't ask you for that information, but mostly not. Some people don't want to give a name at all. Most people, it's just a first name. That's fine. Yeah, that's a common thing.
But it can be anonymous. That's my point. Nobody has to worry
Absolutely,
that they're going to call
absolutely.
up and your real goal is to track down where they live and talk to their pastor.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that we offer, and I don't think I mentioned it here yet, was we have an online community, and this is very private. It's not reachable from a website. You can't click on any button to get there. We only invite people who have called or chatted in, and we've vetted reasonably that they're a good fit. And so then we will take their email and invite them to this organization. And that's another way for people that we feel need more help. And also, if they're looking for a sense of community because they've decided to leave or they've been kicked out of a religious community, it gives them another way to get, a community of like-minded individuals, people who are struggling with the same kinds of problems that they've had, or people who've passed through the trauma and can help them, follow that same path. So that's our online community, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in it now. And one of the nice things about being in that community is Recovering from Religion now runs online Zoom meetings, starting when everyone else went on Zoom when the pandemic started. And these are, live video chats. We have a weekly meeting every Monday, 8:00 Eastern time, where we have a professional come and talk about some subject or other. But the best part of that, I think, is after the 45-minute or hour presentation is it goes on for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours where the people who've, our clients just video chat with one another and talk. And then we have other weekly meetings of less significant nature. There's not a professional speaker, but people can just, hey, let's talk for 2 hours. It's like a weekly, we call it a virtual hangout. Also, the meetups I mentioned, by the way, before the pandemic, to connect it back to that, were live meetings. You'd meet in some building somewhere to do these RFR meetups with people. Pandemic drove everything online. So in a way, if you're really somebody who loves, person-to-person contact, that's a downside. But the plus side is if, it would have been a 4-hour trip for you because it's on the other side of your state. Now you can do it from your living room. You don't even have to do the one in your state. You can pick any of the 60 whatever in the world. And if the schedule happens to work with your daily life schedule, you can go to that, or you can go to multiple ones.
All right. Once again, you've excellently preempted one of my questions, which was
I'm
about
so sorry.
No, that's okay. It was about long-term support. So I kind of want to sum this up here. So if someone makes the call, it's not a one and done. They are welcome to call back multiple times. Are they guaranteed to get the same person so they don't have to start over? Or because you don't follow up with people a week later. You don't call back and say, "Hey, Bill Jones, how's it been going since our conversation?" Of course, that would be. But they are welcome to call back. There are resources you can direct them to. There's the Secular Therapy Project. There are informal meetups, informal Zoom sessions. So long-term support is available.
Yes, and we make that clear. So one way to get the same agent, and I will tell people this, if they insinuate that they really like talking to me, or hey, I liked talking to Andrew last week, is there any way I can talk to him again? I'll tell them how to do that. And we have one way is back up a little bit. So we're a fully volunteer organization. We don't have enough volunteers. If anyone listening to this feels like they would like to help in any of the aspects of what we do, including the helpline, and especially the helpline, you can go to recoveringfromreligion.org, and there's a tab right at the top that says volunteer. Tells you what it's involved, and there's a form to fill out to start the process for that.
And that is the start of the process, right? That is, there's a vetting, and so let's explain that a little bit so people don't think that this is, I know we've covered the training and everything, but speak a little bit about the vetting and whatnot.
Yeah, sure. You get interviewed. In fact, that's one of the things I do. I interview other people. I started doing that just about 3 or 4 months ago. I got into all sorts of things after I started with just a helpline, including being an ambassador, is what they're named, for a spokesman for the organization, which is why you're interviewing me here. It's a way to get our word out to people who might benefit from our services, as well as to get people to volunteer. But so the volunteer process starts when you go to the website, you read the document that tells you what's required. If you feel that fits, you fill out the form, and then you will get an email that says, okay, this is how you schedule an interview. Then somebody like me will get a notice, hey, you've been scheduled for an interview with so-and-so on this date, call them back, and then we'll talk. I've got a series of questions to ask. And then I'll give my report into the agency, whether or not I think the person would be a good fit. Maybe not for the helpline, by the way. We might be, through the conversation, we might find out, well, they really want to help us, but they don't know that they would be really good one-on-one with somebody. They can help find resources. That's a whole team of people. They put that together, and they, help us give that to other people. There are people we need to moderate those online groups that I was talking about, to be the the moderators for the Meetup Groups, or the virtual Zoom chats. There's all sorts of ways you can help our organization, even IT people, because we're constantly trying to update our software to make a better experience for clients as well as the agents. Assuming you get all through that and you get accepted, then there's a series of online videos which everyone watches, a little quiz to make sure you understood that. If you're happy with that and you got through that part of the process, you'll be assigned a one-on-one trainer. That'll last for a little bit of time. There's a meeting, a Zoom meeting that'll be maybe 2 hours, where the trainer will make sure that the new prospective agent understands what they're supposed to do, has read the material, has watched the videos, and then after that they get passed to somebody we call a hero supporter, which is another role I have, which then goes to the final phase of the training, where I will do mock calls and chats. I pretend to be the client, using my experience of people who called me or chatted to me, and throw these out to. It's kind of like a pilot going through a simulation before they're allowed to actually fly the aircraft. And then after that, the person is monitored for a while to make sure they're doing a good job.
Great. And I think that information is super important to get out there. It's not just, click here to volunteer. What's your phone number? We'll start sending you calls. It's not like that at all. All right. So if someone calls in and it just rings and no one picks up, what happens then?
Right. So they can chat and they can go to the text site and chat. They might not like that, but they might prefer talking, and maybe they won't do that, but they can try that too. There's definitely more agents which accept chats than calls. We're always looking for more agents to do both, so we can cover the world in all time zones. That's definitely a need. But one thing that we say on the outgoing message or the calls is that you can schedule a call. So if you go to our main website, again, recoveringfromreligion.org, there's a button that says schedule a call. And that pops open a form that says, hey, please call me back in this time period. This is my name. This is the time zone I live in, that sort of thing. And there's a spot it's not obvious, and I am actually trying to get them to fix that in the new software update. But in the place where you say what time you want to be called back, it's just a text entry field. You can say, hey, I talked to Andrew before. I really want to talk to him again. And that way, it's more likely that Andrew would be the one to call you back. And I will tell people that if they tell me, that's for people who can't get in. But also, as we talked about, I think before, if people want to talk to an agent they talked to before, that's what I would tell them on how to accomplish that. Go to schedule a call, say, I want to talk to Andrew, please, on this time and this day. And it's more likely that Andrew will call them back.
And finally, what's the response of the organization been, both pro and con? Is the organization growing, and have you had any negative reaction?
Well, it's definitely been growing. I mean, it's been around 12 years. Initially, it was just a helpline. Then, I don't know the order because I've only been with it about a year and a half, but things were added one after the other, including the fact that you could chat in instead of just call in from anywhere in the world. The online community was a more recent add. The Meetup Groups, as I mentioned, the Monday RFRX meetings where we have the professionals come in and talk. That's only about a year and a half old. So we keep adding new things. So it is growing. Every month we add new people to the online community, when it's appropriate, as I mentioned before, on a call or a chat. If somebody needs community or if they seem to be looking for that sort of kind of help or ongoing support, we'll invite them. A significant portion take us up on the offer and join the community. So actually, I wrote the numbers down. Right now, we have 1,825 members, and we're adding about 30 to 70 a month. It fluctuates. And that's maybe about half of the people who, give us an email. So some people give us an email, think they want to do it, then they'll get the invitation. For whatever reason, they don't join. Maybe, it went to spam or they just decided they weren't ready for that yet. But that's still a good number. 30 to 70 a month will join us. And regarding, helpline and calls, every year the number and the volume goes up. Right now, we're up to about 290 a month. And that's translates to something like 3,500 people a year will, contact us via chat or call. And we have about 550 agents who are registered to work the helpline. And because we're volunteers, we don't work a fixed schedule. Some people are pretty much inactive. Some very few, do the bulk of the work. So as I mentioned before, we try to help people all across the planet. It's problematic with all the different time zones. So we're always needing more volunteers to help out with that. Regarding the pushback, you did ask about pushback, right?
I did. I do want to reiterate, though, you said you help people all across the planet. So if you are an extraterrestrial, don't call. As a former aerospace engineer, I won't ask you to release any confidential information you have about UFOs and extraterrestrials, but you are saying they are excluded. Is that correct? That's what I'm hearing you. So in effect, you're admitting.
I said people, which I'm not defining as human beings. So no, any sentient creature.
Okay.
And I said across the planet. I'm not excluding aliens on the planet.
Okay. All right. I'll take that as a de facto admission that they do exist.
Do as you will.
Okay. I did ask about pushback.
So about pushback. So occasionally we will have people who call, as you can imagine, on any publicly accessible thing as trolls. It is thankfully not a large number. The Atheist Experience gets those, and a large number of and other such call-in shows get that. And they're, largely suppressed by the call screeners. We don't have call screeners. I pick up the phone. I'm the first person to talk to this person. If they're a troll, they're going to be a troll. We've had a few people, I've had a few people, my anecdotal experience like that. Of the, I want to say, how many people? 367, I looked this up before. I have helped since I've joined on either the chat line or the phone line, mostly the phone line, because that's what I like doing. Maybe 4 people were in some regard, not serious, purposely trolling or that kind of thing. I can tell you about one really interesting story. Somebody called in to teach us at RFR that Mormons were not Christians. And, well, okay, that's basically what he said. Hi, I have to tell you Mormons aren't Christians. Okay, that's an interesting belief. Let's talk about why'd you call our line? We're here to help people recovering from religion. Do you think you have some issues you want to talk about? No, I just want to teach you guys that Mormonism is not Christianity. Okay, and I could have just ended the call there, but I felt a little playful, so I started talking about logical fallacies. And do you understand the no true Scotsman fallacy? What are you talking about? I ain't talking about a Scotsman. And then I explained what it was.
No true Mormon then.
Yeah, it's no true Christian, basically. And this is used a lot in Christian. Any other Christian is not a true Christian. Catholics believe that snake handlers are being controlled by the devil, and evangelicals believe Catholics are going to hell, and it's a common thing. But this is the first time anyone ever called to preach that to me. So he didn't want any help. He didn't really need. He just wanted to. For some reason, this was his thing, and he ended the call when he got too frustrated about not following me regarding the logical fallacy and what that had to do with what he was saying, by hanging up on me, and right before hanging up saying, "You're a goddamn atheist, aren't you?" In an American Southern accent, of course. That was.
But let's be clear. In this case, you knew what was going on and you were playing with him. You did not. If someone calls for true help, you don't start pointing out the logical fallacies of the Bible.
Right, absolutely not. This was not a guy calling for help. This was a guy trying to preach.
And if he was calling for help, you wouldn't say, well, it's a logical fallacy that blah, blah, blah. So.
No, okay. Not the appropriate venue for doing that. No.
Right. Rob Palmer, the well-known skeptic and ambassador and helpline volunteer for recoveringfromreligion.org. You've been my guest today on 502 Conversations. Thank you so much. And you mentioned several other organizations that I will either link to in the description below, or you can link them as well. 502 Conversations, I'm Brian Kerby. Once again, Rob Palmer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian.
You're welcome.